Coming up, President Trump back in Missouri. Could Greitens be back too? Is the former Missouri governor staging a political comeback? Also this week, he was one of our region's biggest political leaders. He's now headed to prison. McCaskill makes up her mind, but what difference will it make in her quest to keep her Senate seat? We pick apart a slew of headline-grabbing stories in Kansas, and we ask, is it just for show? Or do the developers behind the new-look KCI really care what you think?
Week in Review is made possible through the generous support of Dave and Jamie Cummings, Bob and Marlise Gorley, Smithfield Foods, Haas and Wilkerson Insurance, the Courtney S. Turner Charitable Trust, John H. Mize and Bank of America N.A. co-trustees, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome, everyone. I'm Nick Haynes. You know, I can't remember the last time I thought, wow, there's so little going on in Kansas City. I don't know what we're going to discuss this week. This week is no exception. The challenge is packing it all in, but Colleen Nelson is up to the task. She is the former White House correspondent for the Wall Street Journal, now heading up the editorial board of your Kansas City Star. Also with us from the Shawnee Mission Post, reporter and editor Jay Center, KMBC 9's chief political reporter, also around the cozy confines of our Week in Review table, Michael Mahoney, and political analyst, columnist and Star editorial writer Dave Helling. Now, President Trump is back in Missouri this week. As you watch this program Friday night, he is hosting a rally just down the road on the Missouri State University campus in Springfield for Republican U.S. Senate candidate Josh Hawley. Trump's trip comes after he announced and later canceled a campaign rally in Cape Girardeau, citing the impact of Hurricane Florence on the East Coast. This will be President Trump's fifth visit to Missouri since taking office. But what impact do these visits have on Josh Hawley's campaign? Is it strictly a campaign cash booster, or does it actually change hearts and minds as well, Michael?
It gins up the base, and especially in southwest Missouri, which is Trump country, and it's going to be Josh Hawley country in November. It energizes the base, and which is probably pretty important to the Hawley campaign, because there are rumblings out in the weeds that there's still an enthusiasm gap there. The fact that the president is coming in again tonight for this and will be in again before, probably 2 or 3 times, I think, is to generate this up. What I think is interesting about this is the fact that he's in southwest Missouri, which is a red base for the Republican Party in Missouri. The Cape Girardeau visit was the same thing. It was going to be down in the base. He's been here in Kansas City. He's been in St. Louis as well. Let's see where he drops in next.
Could that be on the Kansas side? Why isn't he coming over to Kansas, Jay Center, and being there to stump and rally for some tight races there for governor with Chris Kobach and Kansas Congressman Kevin Yoder?
Well, here in the metro area, it would be a pretty delicate dance for Donald Trump to come and campaign for either Chris Kobach or for Kevin Yoder. What you have seen in the special elections leading up to this cycle is that it is high-educated suburban voters who have bucked the Republican Party during the Trump era and have basically the most high unfavorable numbers for the president. So it would be really, really delicate to have him come to Johnson County especially.
Colleen, while Republican Missouri Senate hopeful Josh Hawley is getting plenty of attention this week from President Trump, his opponent, Senator Claire McCaskill, making lots of news of her own. This week she finally answers the will she or won't she question, and the answer is no. The Missouri Democrat says she won't vote to confirm Brett Kavanaugh to the Supreme Court bench. But while that was not a surprise to many, her explanation was it was not based, she says, on the current sexual assault accusations against him or his previous legal judgments on abortion. In a statement released by the senator's office, she says she opposes the nomination because of Judge Kavanaugh's record on so-called dark money in politics. So how does this decision this week alter in any way, if at all, the trajectory of this race?
It doesn't. I mean, it's an interesting calculation by Claire McCaskill to hang this on dark money. I mean, clearly she must think we're not going to get a definitive answer on the sexual assault question. But, I mean, Claire McCaskill was never going to get Republican votes by virtue of voting yes for Brett Kavanaugh. And she needs her base. And so ultimately, a no vote seemed inevitable here. It was just a question of when, not if.
Did it surprise you, though, Dave, the reason behind Claire McCaskill's decision to say, no, I'm not going to vote for Judge Kavanaugh?
Right. Yes, it's a little surprising if you take it at face value. But the fact of the matter is that whether she commented publicly on the sexual assault allegations or not, that clearly played a bit of a role in the political calculus, because in some ways it took her off the hook, takes all Democrats off the hook, because they can now say, well, my opposition is based on this very serious allegation and not just these other concerns. So I think it gave her a little bit of breathing room to make this decision. Having said that, I think Colleen is exactly right. She was always going to vote no. It was just a question of when she would announce it and what she would base it
Michael.
on.
The other thing about this is, and I agree 100% with Dave and Colleen on this, it was an automatic no vote. The thing about it is there was foreshadowing of this coming in the McCaskill campaign dating back months, certainly. She had been talking about her intense opposition to dark money and third-party expenditures all the way back before 2018, and just a couple, 3 weeks ago here in Kansas City, she even said that she thought dark money was the main serious issue facing American politics down the road. So I think casual observers would say, dark money is the reason. She had been plowing the ground and setting this up for a while.
Now, if you've turned on your TV lately, you know it's wall-to-wall campaign commercials. And what's the #1 issue, though, in the political ads? Well, according to a new national analysis, it depends what party you're in. If you're a Republican, it is taxes and immigration. If you're a Democrat, it's health care. In fact, 2 out of every 3 ads from Democratic candidates are about health, according to a new survey from the Wesleyan University Media Project. And that's true of our local races, too, including the latest ad from Claire McCaskill, who gets personal about battling breast cancer.
2 years ago, I beat breast cancer. Like thousands of other women in Missouri, I don't talk about it much. But those who face cancer and many other illnesses have a pre-existing condition when it comes to health coverage. Unfortunately, Josh Hawley filed a lawsuit letting insurance companies deny coverage for those with pre-existing conditions. That's just wrong, and I'm fighting to stop it. I'm Claire McCaskill, and I approve this message because the insurance companies already have too many senators on their side.
What a hypocrite. Claire McCaskill receives the 2nd most contributions from insurance companies in the entire Senate.
Is the Josh Hawley campaign right? Is McCaskill pocketing more campaign contributions from the insurance industry than almost anyone else in the Senate, Dave Helling?
Well, let's be clear that the insurance industry includes people with connections to the insurance industry, but both sides are taking money from that sector of the economy. The question is where the votes come, what the position of both candidates are in terms of health care as an issue. One of the reasons, Nick, this has come up is because in West Virginia, Joe Manchin, who's the incumbent Democrat, is actually leading in his reelection race in a very Donald Trumpian state because he's focused on health care, and there is polling that suggests, and by the way, anecdotal evidence, if you talk to the candidates, every time they knock on a door, every time they go to a banquet or a luncheon, healthcare is at the top of mind of most voters. It's working, and that's why the battleground you see here in these commercials.
If getting personal about health issues, though, is considered a winning strategy for Democrats, according to the consultants, can it also work for Republicans? Have you seen Chris Kobach's latest ad for governor?
In 1977, a young Kansas boy was diagnosed with diabetes, forcing him to give himself shots every day. It also ended his dream of attending West Point. He became an Eagle Scout and went on to Harvard, where he graduated at the top of his class. That young man is my husband, Chris Kobach. Chris always perseveres, and he never stops fighting for what he believes in.
Already, according to the CDC, 9.4% of the population has diabetes. Is this going to push at least some of them in Kobach's corner? Colleen?
Well, I don't know that that's the play exactly. I mean, I think this is more about just kind of humanizing Chris Kobach. And I mean, he's such a firebrand, and I mean, he has such hard edges in terms of what he's done on illegal immigration and voting rights. And so to tell us a little bit about Chris Kobach, the man, the challenges he's faced, and introduce us to his wife, just kind of softens his image a bit and gives us a sense of him as a human being.
Kobach's Democratic opponent in the race for Kansas governor getting a boost this week as former Republican Senator Nancy Kassebaum announces she's endorsing Kelly over her own party's nominee, Chris Kobach. Kassebaum represented Kansas in the United States Senate for nearly 2 decades, retiring in 1997. That was more than 20 years ago. How does Kassebaum's endorsement alter in any way the direction of this race, Jay Center?
Well, you know, I'm not sure it does a lot. It could give moderate Republicans who are sort of still clinging on to the Republican Party label permission to cross party lines. But What we have seen over the course of the past 20 years is the Republican Party in Kansas move very, very much away from the sort of centrist tradition of Nancy Kassebaum and Bob Dole to a much more conservative anchor right now, where you've seen Sam Brownback and Chris Kobach be the sort of figureheads of the party. So I'm not sure, we saw Paul Davis get a whole bunch of moderate endorsements in 2014, and he lost.
Yeah. I noticed the Governing magazine had a story just this week talking about how this is actually a trend, and it's happening all across the country, where we have even Republican governors in many states not endorsing their Republican nominee, and sometimes the Democratic elected officials in high office in some states not endorsing the Democratic nominee in those races.
It's a true cliche in Kansas that we have three parties, the Republican Party, the Democratic Party, and the moderate Republican Party, and so this isn't a surprise. What I think is interesting and important, though, Nick, is you don't see any of these moderate Republicans moving away from Kobach and going to Greg Orman, because I think a lot of people thought, well, maybe that would be the option. You can't possibly vote for a Democrat, and here's this middle of the road, nonpartisan, bipartisan figure, and that's a place for a Bill Graves or a Nancy Kassebaum to stop. They are not doing so. They're going all the way over to Laura Kelly, and that tells you something important about that movement and about the Orman campaign and whether it can.
But he's not going anywhere, right?
No, I don't believe he's going anywhere. But to Dave's point on this, a lot of the conventional wisdom, of which Dave and I do not subscribe to, by the way, was that Orman was going to be the spoiler for the Democrats, that he was going to be the option for some Republicans. What seems to be happening by virtue of these former Republican officials, the moderates in the party from the old Main Street Bob Dole side of it, is they are, as Jay was talking about, they're going to cross the line here. And the default here is not the businessman third party, but they're going all the way over to the Democrats. There's a split here, no question, in the Republican Party, but it's probably more generational than it is political.
Now, Kansans are getting to see a lot of the candidates for Kansas governor. There have been 2 debates already, with more on the way. Claire McCaskill, Josh Hawley have debated once, with more scheduled. But will there be a debate in the Metro's other big race, the campaign for the Kansas 3rd Congressional District? There are news reports this week that Sharice Davids has declined to participate in several debates against Kansas Republican Congressman Kevin Yoder. The Democratic candidate has clearly got lots of money. She is on the air constantly. So does her participation in debates really matter, Jay Center?
Well, it certainly does, but I would say that the notion that she has steadfastly refused to participate in any debates is sort of the line that's been pushed by the Yoder campaign, and it does appear that behind the scenes there's some work going on to negotiate a time for both of them to get together. I also think it's worth pointing out, Kevin Yoder has some accessibility and openness issues in his past as well, so for him to sort of suggest that this is a person, Sharice Davids is totally closed down, is maybe a little flimsy.
But what is striking about this, in almost every other race that I have covered through my career, it has been the challenger that has been eager to jump through whatever hoops necessary to get on the same stage with an incumbent to get that image of equality and stature. This has been exactly the opposite. The Davids campaign has believed that a lot of these debate offers are not fair and it would not be a level playing field for them, and so they've been reluctant to accept many of them. Yoder, on the other hand, knows he's in a tough fight, a very tough fight, and he's been jumping through all the hoops that a challenger would to debate at most of these venues.
Is this a non-issue, Colleen?
Well, it's probably not what voters are going to decide upon, but ultimately Sharice Davids needs to introduce herself to voters. They're still getting to know her, and so in the end, the more airtime, the more face time she can get, that's probably to her benefit, assuming she's up to the task and performs well. So she probably needs this in the end a little bit more than he does, but I mean, Jay's right. I mean, there are things going on behind the scenes that are not apparent. Sharice Davids has expressed an interest in doing some debates, and Kevin Yoder's expressed an interest in doing some different debates, and so there's definitely some gamesmanship happening.
Can I just say very quickly, though, I think that Kevin Yoder's focus on this suggests that his internal polling suggests, as Mike just pointed out, that he is in the race of his life, because typically an incumbent would make an issue of this and then sort of walk away, but his ads are aggressive. He's complaining about the lack of fundraising for third-party ads from Washington, and even though he has far more money than she does. I think it's the race of his life, and with 6 weeks to go, that's what he's focused on.
Dave's exactly right on this from the standpoint that when I have talked to connected Republicans over in Johnson County, people that support Kevin Yoder on this, they are terrified about this race. They are very concerned.
Cast your mind back, by the way, to August and the confusion over vote counting in the extremely close Republican race for Kansas governor. The ACLU is this week now filing suit against the Johnson County Election Office. They want to get the names of the 350 people who cast provisional ballots in that primary, and the names of voters who cast advance ballots that were rejected because their signature didn't match their voter record. But why does the ACLU want those names, and what difference would it actually make, Jay Center?
Well, it makes the difference of having Johnson County voters have faith in the integrity of their voting system. The issue here is that there are 37,000 advance ballots cast, either at the advance voting locations in person or by mail. More than 150 of these ballots were tossed out because of a question about the signature on the envelope. The people whose ballots were tossed out were never informed that their votes didn't count. That raises serious concerns. If you don't know whether your vote counts or not, we've got a real issue.
The other thing that's a serious concern is the standard is not the same from county to county. Yep. That's absurd. I mean, that means your vote might count in one place and not count in another. And we've said repeatedly on the editorial page that this has to be a top priority for the legislature next year to standardize these counting mechanisms so that every vote that's cast properly is counted.
He was one of Kansas City's most powerful political figures. Now he is headed for prison. Former Jackson County Executive Mike Sanders has been sentenced to serve 27 months in a federal corrections facility. Sanders pleaded guilty to stealing tens of thousands of dollars in campaign funds through an elaborate check cashing scheme. He admitted to using the money to pay his taxes, take vacations, and build a wine cellar in the basement of his home in Independence. He must report to prison November 5th. He could have served up to 5 years in prison, though. Yet prosecutors recommended to the judge he serve 18 to 24 months. Why did he end up being sentenced to more, Colleen?
Well, the judge took a very dim view of his betrayal of the public trust, and she said it's difficult to quantify the harm that he's done, and it's difficult to repair the damage. And he was a public servant. He was a former prosecutor. He certainly knew better, and so he not only is he sentenced to 27 months, but he begged and pleaded to go to kind of a country club prison, and the judge said, "I don't think I'm going to give that to you. We'll let the Federal Bureau of Prisons make that decision."
His long-term aide, Calvin Williford, served 6 months for his involvement in the same check cash scheme. But is this the end of this issue now, Michael Mahoney?
No. One of the things that emerged from Mr. Williford's sentencing was the fact that there are other investigations that are underway, one of which sort of surprised some folks on this. To speak to Colleen's point for a second, another reason beyond the public trust abuse question, which Judge Ketchmark was very, very forceful on, was the fact that at sentencing, Mr. Sanders did not admit to some of the things that prosecutors already knew about his conduct. For example, he never admitted that he ever went to Las Vegas on some of these trips. His co-defendant in this, Mr. Williford, acknowledged it and cooperated a great deal. That is one of the reasons the sentences are so different. The other one is because Sanders was an elected official and there was an abuse of trust there, where Mr. Williford was his right-hand man, his political advisor, his chief of staff. He wasn't held to the same standard in terms of abuse of trust.
What about these opportunities now for investigations that we learned then from that trial, as Michael mentions, about possible other federal inquiries going on among those already in Jackson County government?
Right, and I can tell you that your Kansas City Star is on the case, trying to get a little bit more detail on what these investigations might involve. Apparently they involve a lobbying contract of some sort, certainly involving, one assumes, Mike Sanders during his time as county executive. And as we know, the FBI has enormous powers of investigation, and so I don't think this story has come to an end.
Do you believe in the power of redemption? What about for former Missouri Governor Eric Greitens? He's back in the news this week amid reports that he may be staging a political comeback. Greitens in 2020. Anyone? According to Star columnist Steve Kraske, Greitens has been reaching out to donors to test the waters. How much truth is there to the story, and are Missouri voters ready to give Greitens a second chance, Colleen?
I mean, it's been almost 4 whole months, right? It's time for a comeback. So he's been essentially in hiding since late May when he resigned. But one of his political allies, a state senator, tweeted that he's been reaching out to donors, just kind of testing the water, saying, hey, what do you think about 2020? The question is, we don't know exactly what feedback he's getting from donors yet. It may be they said go fly a kite and you had your chance. But I mean, it's not a surprise to people who know Eric Greitens that he thinks he can make a comeback.
But Michael Mahoney, this is America, the land of second chances, right?
Absolutely. There's a redemptive factor in Missouri politics, and American politics. But to describe the reaction, as I understand it, to that tweet about it was a collective eye roll and groan throughout Missouri politics, going, oh, here we go. I don't think that there's much of a chance that Eric Greitens is going to get a huge groundswell of support for this.
I agree with that, and I think Mike Parson, having taken over as governor, has really impressed a lot of Republicans and Democrats. He's traveled to Kansas City, traveled to St. Louis. He still has relationships, Nick, with rural lawmakers. One assumes that he's going to run in 2020. If that's the case, and Eric Greitens' candidacy would tear the party apart, might doom it to defeat at the polls in the general election. I just think everything argues against any return of Eric Greitens.
But Mike Parson can't do as many push-ups as Eric Greitens.
But the Greitens administration set the bar so low that all the Eric Greitens administration set the bar so low that all Mike Parsons had to do was come in and act like a nice guy, and exactly what he's doing. There's a long story in Jefferson City of him going to eat ice cream with a 5-year-old girl, and it looks absolutely natural. I agree with Dave on this. Greitens' candidacy would cause a great deal of problems for the Missouri Republican Party, and I think Mike Parson likes this job and will run for it in 2020.
You've heard of the blue flu, where police officers or firefighters all call in sick at the same time to make a broader political point. Was there this week a case of the rainbow flu in Prairie Village? That's where almost the entire city council called in absent ahead of a critical decision on gay and lesbian protections. Is it possible 6 council members in the Kansas suburb all had emergencies and unavoidable conflicts? Or is it, as some reports suggest, they were looking to dodge debate on a proposed ordinance granting stronger protections to gay and transgender residents, Jay?
Well, it was definitely a shock. There were several citizens and stakeholders scheduled to testify before the city council meeting that night, and just a couple of hours before it was scheduled, it was canceled. What we found out was that there were 3 council members who had very legitimate excuses for being gone. A 4th, Sheila Myers, said the next day that she was not aware that other people had canceled and didn't know that her not showing up would cause this quorum issue. We have 2, Ted Odell and Brooke Moorhead, who have not come forward with any details about why they were gone. And frankly, in the past, when similar issues have come up, resolutions affirming Prairie Village's opposition to discrimination against women, Moorhead and Odell have been sort of vocal opponents, saying this really isn't the purview of a city government. So there's no smoking gun here, but there's certainly plenty of speculation that they missed on purpose.
Is it time to move on from this issue, Colleen?
Well, the sponsor of this ordinance doesn't want to move on, and so I guess the question is whether the people who canceled at the last minute are just hoping to delay this indefinitely and get this off the agenda. But there's certainly a push to put it back on the agenda, and I mean, elected officials were put in office to answer these tough questions. So come back and vote on this. If your vote is no, just show up for the vote. Participate in the debate.
Not one speck of dirt has been turned on the project, but the developers behind the new KCI Airport really want to make sure they've got their design right before they start building. This week, Edgemoor launches another series of open houses to get your take on the project. If you go to one of these sessions, though, is the developer really going to change any of the plans as a result of what you say, Michael?
They say they will. They say they're listening to people about what specific bells and whistles they would put in the new KCI single terminal. The question, as I understand it, that everybody wants to ask is, when will that first shovel of dirt be turned?
And when will that first shovel of dirt be turned?
Well, it's supposed to be this fall, but we'll see. It was supposed to be open in 2021 as well. So It remains to be seen. I don't think there's any problem with Edgewater going out and going, what do you want to see in the place? That's all fine. People want to know, when are they going to build the damn airport?
They have been asking people what is missing from the airport. What would you like to see that's currently missing from the new single terminal at KCI?
Well, I tweeted out last week. I don't fly very often, and I tweeted out last week they need a newsstand where you can buy a newspaper. You know, you go out to the Star, to the KCI now, you can't find a copy of the Star, the Times, and other things. But I think it should be noted, Nick, quickly, that flying is an inconvenient thing, and I think Kansas Cityans who think the new terminal will somehow eliminate inconvenience are being delusional a little bit. Having gone through it last week, it's still a pain in the butt to fly somewhere, and that's likely to continue.
We ask our viewers the question about what they would like to see that's currently not at the airport. On our Twitter page, DreamWorks suggests a stage to showcase our wonderfully diverse local musicians. Milton has an idea along the same track, an amazing Kansas City gift shop that showcases the best Kansas City has to offer. From our Facebook page, Carrie has more basic pleasures. How about comfortable seating in waiting areas? And what does Michelle want to add? How about a time machine so you can go back and use the old KCI? I don't think that's an option, right?
It is not. We took a vote on this. It's not an option. We're getting a new airport. And I personally am happy about that. And things I'd like to see, I have simple needs. I mean, I think most flyers would like to be able to have a meal and find a restroom once they get past security. And so, I mean, we're setting the bar pretty low.
It was interesting also this week that one of the main hearings was in Merriam, Kansas, where they obviously didn't even vote on the airport. Why was it happening there?
I mean, I think it's part of the public relations push to make sure that there's support across the metro area for this initiative, but I'm not sure that the people of Merriam or any small city have any outsized influence.
Yeah, but a big, I mean, the gesture there is a big chunk of the flying public KCI comes from
Johnson County. Yeah,
right, and we've talked a little bit about a regional airport authority, which we still think at the Star would be a good thing to pursue.
And that is our Week in Review. Our thanks to our news reviewers from the Kansas City Star, Colleen Nelson and Michael Mahoney of KMBC 9 News, from the Shawnee Mission Post, Jay Center, and from the pages of your Kansas City Star, Dave Helling. I'm Nick Haynes. From all of us here at KCPT, thanks for spending part of your weekend with us.